Not every kid who plays doctor becomes one, and not every kid with a toy kitchen wants to be a baker. I love my toy kitchen and the plastic veggies and pans, but I love my full-size kitchen with edible ingredients and baking pans even more. How did I go from a toy kitchen to baking bread and pastries? Well, let me tell you my story. Just like any kid, I'd have a little toy kitchen and a tea set, and eventually I started to help out my mom in the kitchen. I remember the first thing I ever baked was a banana bread. I was 2 years old and my job was to mix all of the ingredients in my mom poured in the bowl on my Dora the Explorer table. When I was 5 though, my mom had to teach me how to cook, since I decided to make myself an egg for breakfast while my parents were sleeping. It was the first time I used the stove by myself and the egg burned on the bottom, so the kitchen smelled a little bit like smoke. That was the first time I cooked by myself, and that was when my mom realized that I had to be taught how to cook so that I wouldn't burn the house down. As I grew up, I helped more in the kitchen. By the age of 7, I was already allowed to use knives, and by the time I was 8, I started using the stove by myself. I started learning more recipes from my mom, and that's when we found out that I was pretty good at cooking. My dad had developed cancer when I was 3, but he had been in remission. When I was 9, I saw he'd cut his hair shorter, and when I asked why, my parents revealed to me that his cancer was back. While he and my mom tried multiple different treatments, I started crafting special menus for my dad, avoiding foods that feed his cancer like wheat, lactose, and meats. I had to learn how to make tasty, gluten-free, and vegan food for him, which to my creative mind was a fun challenge. I made food like sushi with millet instead of white rice, cream cheese made out of seeds or nuts, and gluten-free tamales. I'd use the weeks off we get at Acton to test cancer-friendly recipes that I'd found beforehand and discussed with both of my parents. Even though we tried everything for his health to improve, he passed away when I was 10 years old. My dad and my grandma were both sick at the same time, so I actually played a role in making my grandma's food, since my dad wasn't eating much anymore. After my dad passed away, our diet changed completely. My mom started buying real cheeses and meats like chicken and fish more often, so I learned how to cook them. I also had the freedom to try out making breads and cakes, which my grandma loved, always. This is when I found out that I was actually an amazing baker. Many people told me that I have a good hand for dough, and I realized I could very easily make little changes to recipes and have them turn out even better than the original. COVID-19 hit, and a few weeks into quarantine, my grandma started manifesting symptoms of a completely unrelated lung illness, COPD. During lockdown, I kept on cooking and experimenting, especially after my grandma passed away. I used to spend a lot of time with her, and since now it was just me and my mom, both burnt out from caring for my dad and grandma until their last breaths, I had to find out something to do to keep myself sane while being locked in the place full of memories of their life and death. It was around this time that I started getting very involved with different types of pastry and bread, and this is also when I tried making more complex cakes like a sponge cake, carrot cake, and cheesecake for the very first time. It's kind of crazy how cooking has always sort of been there, but I never paid much attention to it until I started on Business Quest in 2019. I used to play with my toy kitchen as well as bake little mud cakes and decorate them with leaves and flowers that I'd find in my garden when I was small. I also started helping my mom in the kitchen and planning meals, but to be honest, I never really thought of it as my dream job until Acton made us think deeply about our futures. I'm surprised by the progress I've made and the fact that if I needed to work to sustain myself, I know I could do that by baking full time. One of the highlights of my progress was when I won second place in the E-League competition with the food and bread I was selling. I remember I got the largest order I'd ever gotten, 175 bread buns for the San Felipe nursing home. I made these over the course of 3 days and kept track of the amount of bread I was missing on a piece of paper I put on the wall. Before I started, my mom said, "This is the time to test your passion. If you get sick of it, then this might not be the thing you really want to do." This was full days of just bread baking and cleanup, as well as baking for the other orders I'd be getting. I'd finish my day at about 1 a.m. because of cleanup, and I was physically tired, but somehow left with a deep feeling of satisfaction I just couldn't explain. Having been able to sell so much happened thanks to my mom posting the food I made on Facebook. After this, I started to advertise more and make more sales, but I found out the current equipment I have is holding me back from producing and therefore selling more. After pandemic, I became known not only for my empanadas, but also for my brownies and cinnamon rolls. Kids from elementary at school knew me as the brownie girl, and I would bring brownies nearly every week to share. The real drive I have for baking is seeing the joy it gives people to eat the food I make. I get true fulfillment from seeing them all delight in what I cook or bake. During this time, I've also learned how to make many buttercream flavors and expanded my knowledge on pies. I also finished a 40-hour apprenticeship at our school's cafeteria, where I learned how a kitchen moves and functions. It was a fast-paced environment that took me out of my comfort zone, especially since I'm used to cooking and baking with like 2 days of anticipation, and the closest I've been to cooking for clients that are waiting outside has been cooking for my mom and my grandma, and now for the tenant we have at home, for whom I also bake bread buns, empanadas, and pizzas on a monthly basis. I got to school at about 7:50 and helped Zaira, the owner of the cafeteria, get the food and equipment out of the cart and set up the snacks on the cafeteria table, as well as start heating up the beans for the baleadas and the bread with beans. She also makes fruit juices, so I would help put those in the fridge and prep the orders she got for break. During break and lunchtime, I'd do the customer service part, and Zaira would do most of the cooking and give me the change for the clients. I learned how to manage a kitchen and keep track of everything: sales, orders, inventory, and average of how much money is made per day. My next apprenticeship will be at my favorite restaurant and cafe, La Creperia, a place that mixes certain Honduran dishes with sort of French, European, and Mexican cuisine. This is a renowned place in Tegucigalpa with their delicious food and beautiful presentations. After meeting with the owner, she decided for my apprenticeship I would be assigned to the baking department, where I would help make the bread they use and the desserts served at the restaurant, as well as their famous crepe cakes, which have a whole menu dedicated to them. It will definitely be an honor to work with the people who make some of my favorite dishes ever. To turn my goals of a deep dive into the baking industry into a reality, I will need to invest lots of my time and energy and make multiple sacrifices, which I am more than willing to do. I plan to increase my sales of baked goods. I know it's achievable, but to increase my sales, I'd need better equipment than the one I've been using. I've taken the bread baking masterclass by Apollonia Polan, the cooking one masterclass by Gordon Ramsay. To make a proper brioche, for example, you need an oven that cooks food evenly, just as you would to make Gordon's supreme chicken recipe with root vegetables and a French style sauce. I also took the fondant figurine course by M&H Catering and Bakery, where we were taught how to make 4 fondant animals, how to shape the fondant correctly, what is needed to make these figurines, and how long they last refrigerated. I was also requested to help in Giros, a Mediterranean restaurant, making empanadas for an hour and, just assisting the other chefs with making doughs for the other foods they serve. This is just a glimpse of the things I'm doing before I study culinary arts and specialize in pastry and baking. Now, let me explain why I need equipment, though. I'm sorry. The oven I have right now cooks in an uneven manner, and I always need to finish whatever I'm baking in the air fryer. So it's impractical and it's also time consuming, which is why I need a gas convection oven with a fan to distribute the heat evenly. I know that when I advertise, I get many orders, some over 60 empanadas at a time. The problem with these orders is that I can't get them all done in time because I lack the proper equipment. I was able to save up to $1,800 in the past 6 years, which is since my first business fair in 2019. I have spent some of it contributing to replacing old water pipes in our kitchen and changing my broken sink. So I'm sure I'd be able to save up much more with the proper equipment to make my baking more practical. What I need is a proper oven, a 5-tray digital gas convection oven, pricing at $5,500. Once I have this oven, I will do a side-by-side comparison of my sales before and after my new kitchen setup to show the increase in orders, specifically large orders, and also come up with new recipes to get my sales up even higher. I would also start giving cooking courses to newly graduated high school students who are interested in having decent meals. That is, not eating cup noodles every day. I have already started on a plan for the meals, to be able to teach them simple recipes that are quick, tasty, and healthy. The important part would be that these recipes are easy to make in an apartment in the sense of not needing complicated equipment or a lot of space. Out of my first 100 true fans, I have already made my way up to 75. With me creating new recipes and being able to increase my sales, plus the courses I give to high school students who are already going off to college, I would be able to reach 100 even faster. I do all of this with the little girl with her toy kitchen in mind, now that the mindless childhood wish of baking has become a calling, with the hopes to turn it into my reality. Thank you.